Hello, welcome to Real Talk. I am your host, Paul Britton, and we've got movie reviews because that's what we do. All right, let's just jump right into it. We got two theatrical releases and a Netflix release. We'll start with a theatrical release, Faces of Death. Now, if you are as old as me or roughly my age, perhaps older, Faces of Death was an infamous, and I'm using that word 100% correctly, uh, videotape that I don't know exactly when it was released, but the idea, it was a video that had a viral campaign behind it before viral campaigns were even such a thing, and before word of mouth was such a thing. It was independent cinema of like Clerks before there was Clerks. Independent cinema like um 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 what's it called? The Blair Witch Project before there was the Blair Witch Project. It was just a word of mouth thing that people had to see because this video actually shows people dying. Now, turned out that it was just done by somebody who was really good at doing effects and knew how to make it look like it was actually people dying, and or videos of people who have died, that sort of thing. um and it wasn't true. It wasn't true, but I until like maybe a year ago, I always thought it was true. Like at no point, there was very little point in my life where I thought it wasn't true. They did a really good job of making it. That's what this is about. I had never seen the whole thing. I had seen pieces of it. I just really wasn't interested at the time in watching it. So when I was exposed to it, I was like, oh no, I'm out. I'm out. And so, but uh brilliantly, somebody was like, hey, there's this franchise. It's called Faces of Death. It has there were, by the way, there was the original video, and then they came out with more and more. And once the second one came out, it became pretty obvious that these aren't real. The somebody had the brilliant idea. We could really make, IP's the thing. We could really make a movie based off of this. Like, we could revive this and have a narrative film behind the Faces of Death title, and yeah, and brilliant idea. Do that. And ultimately, and this was made by the guy who wrote and directed How to Bomb a Pipeline, which was just a fantastic indie flick from 2022. And this is a movie where if you go into it with, I went into it pretty blind. I didn't know a lot about it. This might be unfair for me to, assign this sort of narrative to it, of a woman who is working at like a TikTok type company as a content approver. Something gets flagged as inappropriate. She goes through and decides, is it appropriate? Should it just be flagged as, warning, or should it be removed? And she starts noticing snuff films coming through, and at first she's like, oh, this doesn't look real, but then she starts getting the feeling that they are real. And so away we go. She tries to figure out what's going on. She plays private detective, and gets caught up in the web of these snuff films. And I was intrigued. I was like, yeah, that's really fucking cool. And the the way you do this is like Seven, you know, like I it, that's what I'm so this is a movie where if you can set your expectations correctly, I think your entire experience is going to be based off of how do you set your expectations. My expectations were a seven like a seven hyphen like um movie that is more of a thriller and more of a can we piece together what's going on here and how deep does somebody go, and that was my expectation. That was not this movie. And so um and that's okay. Like, you know, this is a classic. I am not going to criticize. I'm going to meet the movie on its own terms, and I'm going to judge the movie based on my reaction to the movie. I will not judge it negatively just because it wasn't the movie I was expecting. However, I do feel like the movie I was expecting might have held me a little better. Ultimately, what it really becomes is a pretty hardcore slasher serial killer flick. We are introduced to the serial killer right away, like that, and that cannot be a spoiler because you meet him literally like with it during the first act. And if you like slasher movies, man, I I get the feeling that there are going to be people that really like this movie because I think it's a pretty good slasher movie. I don't care for slasher movies at all, so this just landed super flat for me. One of the things came with me, and he didn't care for it either. And his comment, that Linus, my son, his comment was that so they give backstory to the woman who is the approver of the TikTok videos, and the backstory they give her is just unlikely, and it just feels super manufactured. The other thing I will say is that the criticism of TikTok and TikTok culture that is driven into this movie is a little too on the nose and a little too yeah, okay, obviously. And so it's tough. You know, that becomes tough to be like, let's let's hate on that. And so because it's like we already hate on that, you know, and so ultimately it didn't land for me, because this just wasn't if I knew it was a slasher thing, I'd probably not even picking to go see it, although I would have been curious to see what they did with the Faces of Death franchise. Here at Real Talk, we do tacos instead of stars, and if we feel like something deserves a little extra, we're going to add some guac instead of saying a half a taco like you would with a half a star. Why? Because nobody eats half a fucking taco. All right, this just lands at 2 tacos plus guac for me. And the guac just goes to the franchise and the idea of making this into a franchise movie. It's a perfectly okay slasher film, and I think my ceiling on slasher films is just going to be like 3 tacos. Like I probably would never rate a slasher film over 3 tacos, but 2 tacos plus guac, yeah, we'll do that. Next movie we're doing is a theatrical release out of Japan called Exit 8, which apparently, and I have no idea, I had no idea, is also a video game. And the concept of the video game is that you are in a train station, and you are going down a hallway, and like anytime you see something weird, you have to like turn around and run away from it and go the other way until you identify all the weird things in the movie. Okay, so in the movie they call them anomalies. So the concept of the movie is there's a guy, he's getting off a train, he's having a conversation with his ex-girlfriend. She tells him she's pregnant. He had just had witnessed an encounter on a train, and he didn't do anything about the encounter where a guy was giving a woman a hard time, and he felt bad about that. So it's just a guy who's feeling bad about himself. He's on his way to his first day of a temp job, and he's looking to leave the train station and exit 8, and he gets caught into a series of a hallway where it's just a left turn, walk 10 feet, right turn, walk 10 feet, left turn, 20 feet, right turn, walk 20 feet, left turn, walk 20 feet. And eventually, and it gets to be where it's like there's a pattern, and like everything he passes is the same thing. So it's like an infinity hallway. And then he notices a sign that says, if you see an anomaly, or keep walking forward. If you see an anomaly, stop immediately and walk backwards. Walk the other way. And if you miss an anomaly, it's just, and one of the signs has a big exit 0 sign, and then when he realizes, oh, that's an anomaly, I walk backwards, that 0 becomes a 1. And then if he gets another anomaly and walks backwards, that 1 becomes a 2. And so because he's looking for exit 8 is the stop that he's supposed to get off on, or not the stop, but the exit number that he's supposed to get off on. He realizes he needs to identify the anomalies 8 times. Sometimes they're obvious, sometimes they're super subtle, like slight change. Like there are advertisement posters, and there's a ever so slight change in one of the posters, and that's the anomaly that you have to catch. And if you miss it, you get knocked back down to 0. This movie absolutely works. I have nitpicks. There are certain things that happen along the way that I would just absolutely change. One thing, they give him asthma. That just wears out really fucking quickly, and they kind of drop it after a little while. I understand they're making him like a weakling, or like, they really pile up on him and during the first act of the movie, as far as the negativity and the how much of a low person he is, how low he is, and how things just aren't working for him. But it's like asthma, one too far, one too many. Like, you don't do that. Like, so I have problems, but the feel of this movie the tone of this movie was just fascinating, and worked really well for me. I really enjoyed it. And for that, I'm giving it 4 tacos, and that might be maybe too much. But I don't feel like giving it guac. And it's definitely more than 3 tacos. So I'm giving it 4. I don't know. I think it's 4 tacos. It's just a really fascinating movie. I highly encourage people check it out. The tone is spot on, creepy and urgent and interesting and immersive, and you just keep walking down the same hallway. Even when you turn back around, you still walk down the same. It's fascinating, and it really, really, really works. And bravo. Speaking of things that work, we're going to go the opposite direction and talk about Thrash on Netflix. Okay. The conceit for the movie opens with dire warnings about the strength of Atlantic tropical storms in the Atlantic, hurricanes, and how over the past 20 years the number of storms has increased by X%, and the strength of those storms when they hit the land is increased by X times 2. And we're presented with a small town. I don't even remember. I thought it was Louisiana. I don't know that it's Louisiana. I think it might have been South Carolina. I'm not sure. But it's a small town in the Southeast, that happens to be along the coast, and the first act is just setting up jokes and plot points that are you're going to encounter throughout the rest of the movie. That's it. And then a hurricane arrives. By the way, um, this hurricane was a tropical storm yesterday, and they're concerned it's going to be a category 5 storm when it hits land the next day. Okay, as somebody who's lived in Florida for 30 plus years of his life, I assure you that doesn't happen. Like, that's just not how it works. And could that be how it happens eventually? Maybe. Unlikely. The fuel for the storm is deep, warm water. And when you get as close to the storm as that storm was to the coast, the water is way too shallow and it's not going to be able to feed on anything. So automatically I'm fucking annoyed with the science. And then I get even more fucking annoyed when there is the storm surge floods the town. Believable, I buy that. When the storm surge hits a meat packing plant, it blows up a tanker carrier that was carrying, liquid waste. There's chum in the water. Don't worry, the chum in the water was already telegraphed during the first act, so we're good. This is the start of the second act when the storm finally hits. And with the chum in the water, a whole bunch of sharks come sweeping into the streets because of the chum, and then they're so frenzied they start eating people. That's the movie. The characters are not worth mentioning. Nothing else really happening in this movie is worth mentioning. I can't recommend anybody watch it. The problem with these kinds of movies is all it does is play upon people's preconceived fears and distrust of sharks, which aren't going to attack people, have no interest in harming people, even if they did get lured into an area filled with people because of chum. It still doesn't work that way. And this is just going to feed people's stupidity. Like it's not even fears. It's people who have fears are going to understand this is bullshit. This is people who are stupid enough to have a genuine respect and fear for the animals and just feed their stupidity. And so because of that, it gets one taco. I was thinking of giving it one taco plus guac because in spite of what I just said, there, like I got into some of the action, I guess, but then I thought about it. I was like, no, fuck this movie. One taco. All right. This is Real to Real Talk. I'm your host, Paul Britton. Thank you for coming out. Be sure to go see movies in the theater, including Exit 8. Highly, highly recommend. That's going to be a hidden gem. You're going to see that on a streamer and regret having not seen it in a theater because it's just a super fun movie to see in a theater of people. But hey, it's cool if you wait for it to stream it as long as you catch it out of Japan. Good job.